Hello everybody, and welcome to this webinar where we'll be covering the basics of VDV. We're not going to go much into depth or full depth about all of the features, but we're going to cover how to set up a new project from start to finish. But before we get started, if you have any questions during this session, just feel free to ask a question, and one of our team members will get right back to you. For today's agenda, we'll provide some quick background information about how Vista Data Vision works, what kind of data is supported, and so on. We'll import some data, then visualize the data. We'll configure alarms, we'll create users, and then we'll take a look at a couple of options on how to manage the data. So after today's session, we'll have a fully customized or installed new project. All right, let's get to it. Just to give you more information about how the data goes from a sensor data logger to Vista Data Vision, you'll find on the left-hand side a monitoring station. And this can be a manually collected station or automatically collected station. Typically, you would have a data logger connected to sensors. The data is then sent to a server or manually collected. As soon as it's on the server, Vista Data Vision imports the data and adds it to the database. And then you have web access to the data. Vista Data Vision is being used in all kinds of different monitoring fields around the world, but what unites all of our users is that they need a reliable system. A robust system to monitor and manage all other instrumentation data. So these are experts in different fields of instrumentation, and Vista Data Vision is being used to visualize and manage their data. We have a couple of points to discuss. Vista Data Vision is inputting data from text-based data files, and they look like this. It can be one big appended data file, or it can be multiple, small, incremental data files being sent from FTP, for example. There needs to be some kind of column separation. Vista Data Vision is scanning all of these files every minute and inputting new data. Vista Data Vision supports data from any data logger, as long as it's in text-based data formats, as I mentioned. It's scanning all data 24/7, 365. Every minute, it's inputting the data into the database. As soon as the visualization has been created, it's automatically updated every minute, and alarms are sent out if the thresholds are exceeded. We have two options. It can either be run in-house on your own servers, or you can host the project on our cloud platform. It is super scalable. We have projects where you have 2 sensors and 1 data logger, and we have projects where you have 1,500 data loggers and more than 20,000 sensors, so it should fit everybody's needs. VDV is our sole product, so all day, every day, we're making improvements. We do bug fixes and new features, and we provide support. We want to deliver excellence, and we get feedback from our customers all over the world. They're professionals in their fields, which we take into account when we're making improvements. But before we get started, there are a couple of glossaries. An owner is a project or a client name in the system. One VDV system can have multiple owners, and it's used to categorize data and layouts into multiple different projects. A site is a data file that has been imported into the database. If you have any questions after this webinar, you can consult the help list at help.vistadatavision.com or send us an email to support@vistadatavision.com. All right, let's get started. I'm simply going to open up a web browser, and I'm going to log into the system here. I'm an admin of this system. I'd like to just quickly go over what we're seeing here. On the left-hand side, we have our menu. I'm an admin, so I can see all of the features in the system. Here, I can quickly minimize the menu if I need more space. And in the top right-hand corner, I have Alarm Overview, where I can confirm my alarms. Here, I can click my user icon to change my username, password, and logout. I have a bookmark option where I can bookmark my most used sites in the system. Here, we can also click Full Screen if I want to view it on a full screen. Before we get started and we import any data, we're going to create a new project, so we need to create a new owner. If I'm going to do any configuration or any changes in the system, I'll find that under Setup. So I simply click Setup, and I can use here the filter to locate my owner. Here I have a couple of owners in my system, and in the right menu I can add a new owner. Now we're going to set up a new project, but before we do that, we need to create a new owner. If I'm doing the configuration setup, I'll locate this setup option in my menu, and I can use the filter to locate my owner setup. So I'm going to create a new owner, and I'll find that here in the top right-hand corner. I'm just going to name it Webinar, and I'll click Save. And now I have a new owner. When I'm doing a data import, I'll choose this owner, which will own the data that I'm going to input. The next step is going to be the data import. I have an option here called Data Source, and here I have a couple of options. I have a file location in which I'm telling the system where my data files are being stored. It can be an FTP drive, a network drive, or just a local drive on the computer or server that is running Vista Data Vision. Here we have one location, and then we create a file format. In the file format, I'm simply telling Vista Data Vision what my data file looks like, what my timestamp looks like, and in which column my timestamp is, what kind of file ending, the delimiter, the decimal points, and so on. Then I simply go to File Import, and I'm going to import one data file. I choose my format, then I need to choose my owner, who is going to own the data that I'm going to import. Here, I'll just use my automatic weather station, and I'll give it a name. Then I have the option to choose a single file or incremental file. In this case, I just have one single file. I'll click Next. The system will give me a preview of my data file, and everything looks good. Here I can change the alias names if I want to, and I can also select units. I'm going to choose my wind speed as well. I'll click Next. It's going to give me an overview, and I click Save. Now, in a minute or so, Vista Data Vision will go in and import this data file. And now we can start by creating some visualization. We're going to start by creating something called a dashboard. Here we have a couple of dashboards, but I'm going to create a new one. I'll give it a name simply by calling it Webinar. Again, I need to choose the owner of this webinar. I'll minimize the menu here so I have more space, and I click here on the big plus icon to create a new box. Then I have here a couple of options to choose from to determine what is supposed to be in each box. I can do a graph, I can do a table, or I can do a photo. I can do an alarm overview, text box, and so on. To start with, I'm just going to do a text box. And I'll increase this a little bit. I can double-click on the header to make it automatically full screen. And I'll just do something like this. Next up, I want to create a graph, so I choose a graph. and I choose a couple of variables. I have here my station, which we imported a few seconds ago. Here, I'm just going to throw in the battery. I give it a name, like that. And then, if I want to, I could have changed the scale here, so I'm not using an automatic scale, but I might want to set it to 10 to 15. I also want to create a numeric indicator. Again, I'm just going to choose my battery. I want to have a numeric indicator showing the value last as well. We can do other options, such as a compass, which is going to be our wind direction, for example. We can add a needle gauge that you can use for any variable. But let's say I'm going to use it for my wind speed. I'm going to set my max value to 25. Then I can also set the highlights color. From 0 to 5 might be a proper wind speed. But if it goes above 5, maybe 5 to 10, so I'm going to have perhaps a yellow one. But if it goes above 10 to 25, I'm going to have a red one. You can have this for any variable in the system. I can also do a progress bar. I can do a tank, and so on. I'm going to add a couple of photos, since I have a few pictures here on my desktop. Just a couple of images that you can add. I'll click Apply, then I click Save. So now I've created the dashboard. I can, at any time, click here on the dashboard and open up my dashboard. So here I have the first dashboard I created. When viewing a dashboard, you can expand each component. You can quickly download the data from that component. And you can also click here on the ... icon to change the scale. So let's go here for 2 months. I'll go back to 1 week, and you also have the option to edit a dashboard right here. One thing to notice is that on the dashboard, you can add data from any data source or station that you have in the system. For example, if I create a new graph, I don't need to choose data from only this specific weather station. Here, I can also choose different sensors to have them plotted. This is data from a different data logger. It's very simple and quick to create a project overview. And for example, I can throw in here alarm overview as well. I'm going to choose a couple of different projects just so we can see something. So I click Apply, and we now have a box here with all of the alarms. For this specific project, I can also add something called Update Overview, which will show us all of our sites and the age of all of our data. So here we have one site called AWS Webinar, and the data is 2 hours and 29 minutes old. Now click Update so you can have multiple dashboards. It's very easy to do. Anybody can do it, and you can create it in a matter of minutes. Next up in the visualization aspect would be something called Real-Time Display. Again, I go to Setup and locate my real-time display. Real-time display is different from the dashboard. It's where you have a picture in the background and you're placing your sensor on top. It can be just a white image, or it can be a map or a photo of the project. So before I'm going to create it, let's just take a look at a couple of examples. Here we have a real-time display of a dam. You can place all your sensors. It'll show green, yellow, and red, depending on the alarm status. And here's another example. It's not aerial footage, but just an image of the dam itself. And here you can, again, place all of your sensors. You can add images to give more information about the location. But how do we create it? We go to Setup and Real-Time Display. We click a new one, and first off, we're going to create here a webinar overview. Again, we choose the owner, and it's going to be our O1 webinar. And we choose our image. I have here an image created before this webinar. In this case, it's just an overview map of Brussels. On the right-hand side, we have a couple of options. We have here General, Data Groups, Contour, Indicators, Navigation, and Photos. Under General, you'll find general configuration for this real-time display. You can change the image, and you can change how it looks at field. The Data Groups is where you create where you're adding your sensors. So let's start by creating one station. I'm going to call it Station 1. So now that I've created a station, I need to add sensors to my station. I'll just go here and add a couple of sensors and add here a couple of extension meters. And then I can simply add my group to my real-time display. It's pretty simple, but I'm going to create one more. And again, I'm going to add a couple of sensors here to my second group. You can have 2 groups, 10 groups, 50 groups, or 100 groups on a real-time display. All right, now I'm going to go to General and I'm going to make some changes to how it looks and feels. First off, I'm going to change the line padding, which will say how much padding is in the data table. All right, I'm going to increase my station name. And I'm going to change the font color and the background color to light blue. Something like this. I can also increase my main font size, and I can decide whether I want to keep my timestamp a little bit smaller. I click Back, so now I have one real-time display here with 2 data groups. And the photos are what you would expect. You can simply choose a photo. Here, I'm going to just use one photo. You can choose, if you want, to have a small or large icon. And it can be placed here, or you can choose where you want to have it. At any time, you can use the XY coordinates to move it around to the right location. 0.0 is the top left-hand corner, and then the location of each item is in pixels. I can throw in a different image, and I'll throw that in here. I'll click Back, then Close, and now when I'm done, this is automatically saved. I'll simply go here to Webinar Overview, where I have my 2 stations. I can click on any value to take a look at what's been going on for the past couple of days. I can click here on my image to take a look at it. But let's do something more. I'm going to go back to Real-Time Display so I can edit my webinar overview. Here, I'm going to display alarm status. That means that if I have an alarm configured for these sensors, it'll change colors depending on the alarm status to go from green, yellow, and red. If I have multiple data groups on my real-time display, it can be of interest to display them as a box with pop-up information. I'll just increase the size of the box. This means that I'll just display a box, and the box will have the color of the highest alarm. So here I have 3 green alarms, no alarm, and 1 yellow, so that means that the box here will be yellow. So if you have 50 data groups, it could be of interest to display them like this. Under Indicators, you can add multiple indicators, and you can have here an alarm table. You can do a numeric indicator, or you can do a text box. The text box could be just general information or combat information about this project. So I'm going to go back and close, then I'm going to create a new real-time display. I'm going to create a new one and call it South Area. Here I have a different real-time display or image that I created. I need to select the owner. And this is going to be a more zoomed-in image. So we first did an overview, then we're going to do 2 more zoomed-in real-time displays with more information, and then we're going to link them all together. Here again, we can throw in more information. We can have multiple data groups. Here, I'm going to throw in just 1 station over there. And I'm going to add here a second station as well. And throw that in there. I'm going to do an indicator, and I'm just going to include a graph. Then I'm going to throw in here my battery voltage as just an example, and increase the width a little bit. So I have here my graph as well. I'm going to select here not 2 days, but let's say the last 6 days. As you see, this real-time display can include many more details than our overview. We can add here a numeric indicator, multiple boxes, and so on. We'll go again to General and quickly change here the line padding and the names. I'll click Close. Now I want to do a navigation where I'm going from this real-time display to our overview. So I click Navigation, then I click New. And I choose my Webinar Overview. You can have multiple layers of real-time display, so I'm just going to add it here back to the overview. Now I need to edit my webinar overview and add a link to our more close-up real-time display. So to create a new navigation, I'm going to choose the South area. And I'll just add a link here. You can have multiple links and multiple real-time displays. If I open up here my webinar overview again, I can see here my images and I can see here my alarm status. But now I can click on South area. Now I have different real-time displays with more detailed information about this area specifically. And I have a link here back to our overview. You can also see that the overview button is yellow because I have a yellow alarm, which is a high, and low alarm on the other real-time display. If I had a red alarm, which is a critical alarm, this button will actually be red. All right, excellent. Now we've created this real-time display. Let's see what we can do if we go back to our dashboard setup. Here we can also add this real-time display to our dashboard. I'm going to choose here my webinar overview. Here I have my dashboard, and I'll click Update. And if I open up my webinar dashboard, I have here all of the information as before, but at the bottom, we also have our real-time display. And the same functionality, I can click on any value. I can click here in the South area to go into more detail. It's the same functionality, but you're just combining it all into one big dashboard. It's super simple, and anybody could do it. All right, the next option with the visualization would be the GIS. We covered GIS in specific in another webinar. I'm just going to quickly show that I have here one GIS map. I can click Edit. Here I can click Markers, and I can add markers. It can't just be a variable, which is just a graph. You can add a dashboard, displacement graph, real-time display, webcam, and so on. I'm going to include a real-time display, and I'm going to select my webinar overview. I can choose my icon, and I can point to the GIS where I want it to be located. Here, we can also add my dashboard, which is going to be my webinar dashboard, and I can throw that in there as well. It's very easy to add this to a GIS map as well. If I take a look at my GIS map, here I have my webinar dashboard. It's the same functionality as before, and here it's linked directly to the real-time display. All right, so this was the end of the visualization aspect. Next, we're going to take a look at alarms and contacts. Before sending out any alarms from the system, you need to create a contact. There can be multiple contacts in the system, and each contact can have multiple email addresses separated by a comma. Again, I choose the owner, and I choose to type in the company and click Save. So you can have here 10 contacts, 20 contacts, or 100 contacts. Here, we'll just have 2 contacts. When we have a contact, we need to create a contact group. Again, you can have multiple contact groups, and in each group, you can have one or more contacts. So here I have one contact group called Maintenance. I can also create a new one, which we'll call Admins. Again, I need to choose the owner, and then for each group, you can simply click here the user icon and add people to the group. You can have the same users in multiple groups. And these are the people that will receive alarms and reports when you're configuring the alarms and the reports. All right, let's take a look at the alarms. Again, we're doing a change in the system, so we go to Setup, and here, up top, we have 3 alarms. We have something called Alarm, Custom Alarm, and Bulk Alarm. Let's go quickly to the alarm. Here's a list of all of our sites in the system. Here, we just click Edit, and it'll give us a list of all our sensors. If I want to monitor the battery, I simply check the monitor. I'll type in here 11 and 11.5. And that's my low, low, and low alarms. So if it goes below 11.5, I'll receive an alarm. And of course, below 11, I'll also receive an alarm. Delay means that if I'm frequently getting a bad reading that I don't want to receive an alarm for, I can set the delay at 60 minutes or any other value. The alarm needs to be active for at least, in this case, 2 hours before it's actually triggered. And if it's a critical alarm, I can have the system send me a repeated email or text message every 15 minutes until I actually confirm it. And at the bottom, we need to choose our contact groups. Here, I'm going to choose my maintenance contact group. And in the system, you can send, for example, the low and high warnings to a maintenance group, which is just going to be my maintenance. And my client group is going to be my admins. The admins are not going to receive the warnings, which are just going to be low and high warnings. But they're going to receive the critical warning, which will be the low, low and the high, high. This is because everybody doesn't need to receive all of the alarms. For each sensor, you can throw in a custom text message. So if this goes to a low, low, go on-site and change the battery. Somebody's going to receive this and they'll give me a call. Then they'll go on-site and change the battery. You can include that for any sensor, and at the bottom you can also choose Attachment. I want to include a graph and a data file for the last 12 hours leading up to the alarm, so the people receiving the alarm don't need to log in to take a look at what has been going on. The data and graph will actually be sent to their inbox. I'll just click Save. Sometimes you're not using something. In this case, we're not using the upper limits. We'll just type in a value that is just out of reach because we're just interested in using the low, low and the low values for our battery. So now, every time data is input into the database, the system is scanning every minute. I'll check the battery voltage for these alarms and send me an email or text message if the value exceeds the threshold. The next stop is the custom alarm. The custom alarm is where you're doing more calculation of the data, but not just the latest value. I can go here to, for example, I'll take my rain from my weather station, and if the summary for the last 12 hours is above 5, then the alarm is triggered. We're not just taking a look at the last value, but we're actually taking a look at a summary, or an average, or a rate of change over a specific time period, and if it's above or below a specific constant, an alarm is triggered. The system is scanning every time data is input, taking a look at the last 12 hours. In this case, it's checking for the alarm threshold and then sending out an alarm. Here you have the same option as before, and we can send this to the maintenance group. You have here Repeat and Delay. It's the same as before. The last option is called Bulk Alarm. We have a lot of our users who have 100 stations, for example, and they want to do alarms on multiple sensors at a time, all with the same limits. It could be time-consuming to go into each site and set the alarm limit, so here you can create a new bulk alarm. You can easily create multiple alarm limits. Here, for example, we have 3 alarm limits for our battery, and you can choose a sensor for multiple stations and add them all into one bulk alarm. In this case, we're adding our battery voltage for all of our stations. These 5 battery voltages will be checked for the 3 alarm limits. This is just to make it easier to manage multiple sensors that you're checking for multiple alarms. Excellent! The last alarm is something called Data Update Alarm. For all of these sites or data files that are being input into the system, you can tell the system to notify you if data is not being input. So, for example, here we have our webinar site. Here, I'll just click Edit. Then I'll activate the monitor, and I'll say that if no data is input for 5 hours, I want an email sent to my maintenance group. I'll now click Confirm. So now the system is checking each time new data has been input. If it has not been input for the last 5 hours, I'll send out a notification to the maintenance group. We can then use the filter to filter out the site that you're looking for, and you can also use here the ... icon. Note that you can actually set the monitor or the alarm for multiple stations at a time. I'm going to set this for 7 hours, and I'm going to choose Maintenance. I'll click Update, and then click Confirm, and it'll change the alarms, like the alarm configuration for all of these sites that I've filtered out. In our menu, we then have something called Update Overview. It'll show us a list of all the sites that we're inputting. It'll also show the age of our data. You'll then have either a green, a red, or a white background. A green background means that we've configured the data update alarm and it's not active. A red one means that we've configured a data update alarm and the alarm is active. So we actually have an alarm here for this specific station. The white background color means that we've not configured the data update alarm, so we should do that. We'll configure the data update alarm. In the Update Overview, we have here the ... button as well. And here we can ask before we quickly filter out a specific station, or we can only show active sites with active alarms, and so on. Next up is going to be the calculation of data. We call it virtual variable. Virtual variable is where you're doing the calculation on the raw data from the data logger. A virtual variable can be used as any other variable in the system. You can configure it for alarm, add it to a real-time display dashboard, GIS reports, and so on. I'm just going to edit here one alarm, the virtual variable. You give it a name, and here you have your equation. You can do multiple complex and mathematical functions of the data, and you can have data or sensor from different data loggers in the same equation. Typically, you're doing calibration or an offset of the data. We have a couple of options here. We can click Calculation Example just to be sure that our calculation is correct. The datum can be used to choose our baseline reading. And if I choose specific times, then I can actually, instead of typing this value in here, which is going to be my baseline reading, I can just type in here a datum. This is just going to grab my datum reading. If it's a complex calculation, I can do constants. I could actually take this here to create a new constant, and I'll type it here as a b. Then, instead of typing in the value, I can just have the constant here in the equation. I can also do a rate of change, so if I activate it, in this case, it'll actually take a current reading and do a difference between the current reading and the reading 24 hours ago and plot that. Then you would see the change in value for the last 24 hours. Recently we had an option called Time Variable, and if I activate that, I'll get a date box here. And this is what you're doing if you need to do multiple calculations on the data, or if you're doing a new calibration of the sensor. So let's say this equation is valid from February 1st, 2018. Then, to go on-site and recalibrate it, I'll just click here the plus button at the bottom. I'll do a small offset here. And this equation is valid from the 7th of October, 2019. Now, when the data is being plotted in this equation here, in the beginning, it's used for data from 2018, and this equation is used for all data after the 7th of October, 2019. As I mentioned before, the virtual variable can be included in any visualization in Vista Data Vision. All right, now we've created the visualization, we've configured alarms, and we've created a virtual variable. Next up is to create a user. So again, we go to Setup and simply click User. Here we have a couple of users, but we're going to create a new one. So I'm just going to create a new user, and I'll call it O1 Webinar. I'm going to give it a full name, just Webinar, and the password is going to be 1234. The default page shows what the users will see when they log in. I'm going to choose Dashboard. I want them to see the dashboard when they log in. I can have the user expire, so if it's just a temporary user, I can say that they can only log in until the 1st of November, for example. I'm going to skip that, and then you can give them access to the owner. I'm going to choose here O1 Webinar. Next, we have two options here under Features and Setup. You can choose what features the specific user has access to. Here, I'm going to give them access to the dashboard, real-time display, alarm overview, and bookmarks. Then I'm going to give them access to documents and notes. I'm going to cover documents and notes here in a few minutes. I'm going to give them access to Update Overview as well. I'm not going to give them access to any configuration, but everything is controlled through user access. If you want them to be able to do alarm setup, for example, you simply activate that. Now we see here at the bottom we have sites, dashboards, and real-time display. I'm going to choose all sites, all dashboards, and all real-time displays. That means they'll have access to all sites, dashboards, and real-time displays that are available. They'll be created at a later stage. If I just want to give them access to this webinar overview, I can just choose that. And that means they'll not have access to any new real-time displays that'll be created for this specific owner. All right, here I'm going to click Save, and now I've created this specific new user. I'm going to open up a new browser. I'm typing here our username and password. When I log in and log directly into the webinar dashboard, you can see the menu is much simpler than before. Here we have access to Alarm Overview. And here we have access to our dashboard. We just have one dashboard. We have access here to download data and real-time display. So this specific user will just see data that belongs to this webinar owner. But if this user would then have a different project coming up, I could simply edit that user and I can quickly give them access to new projects. If I give them access here to Demo Water and Demo Geo, for example, you can see these sites have more sites available, and we have more dashboards and more real-time displays. If you're creating multiple users and they all have similar access, you can create something called User Role. The user role is like a template. I'm just going here. Just a client template. I'll give them access to the dashboard, and I'll give them access to bookmarks, as well as alarm overview and real-time display just to view documents, and no setup. And I click Save. So when I'm going to create a new user, instead of needing to remember to check all of the boxes, I have here something called User Role. Client Template. Everything is then grayed out, and it's predefined that I have this specific user access to the dashboard, real-time displays, alarm overview, and so on. It's very simple to do a template for different user privileges. All right, so now we've created dashboard, GIS, real-time displays, contact groups, and virtual variables. So we've actually created a user that we can send to the client or to the staff members that allows them to log in and view the data. Now we're going to take a look at a couple of smaller but very important features that can be useful. First off is the reports. This is a new feature that we released a couple of weeks ago. It's similar to the dashboard, but you can create multiple reports, and you can add your graphs as you've created them in the dashboard, for example. Here we have a text box, and we have a couple of graphs. Here we can add, for example, a graph at the bottom. I can choose a specific graph. And we can throw that in. We can also add a text box, a heading graph, and the table. This is something that we're going to build on to add more components to this report feature. Now the report can be sent. I'm going to choose the owner, and I'll choose our admin contact group, and I'll activate the schedule that I want to send monthly. I'm going to send it out at 8 a.m. on the 1st of each month. I'll click Save. Now I have this report that's going to be generated automatically on the 1st of each month. It's going to be sent to my admin contact group. Again, if we want to have more people in our admin group, we'll just create them as contacts and add them to the group. This way, more people will receive the report. I can also download it here on the fly. I can choose a custom time period, like the 1st of October until today. The graphs are automatically updated, and I can click Download. The system will now create a PDF report. It can take a few seconds depending on the size of the report and the time period. Now I have here my PDF report. So this is how the report will look when it's being sent as an email attachment. Alright, the next item is something called Webcam. You can have a webcam in the system, either one webcam, 5 webcams, or 100 webcams. In this case, a webcam is being sent, or an image is being sent with an FTP to the server, and Vista Data Vision is grabbing the image and inputting it to the database. You have access to all historical images, and you can add the webcam to a dashboard. You can add it to a GIS as well. You can also choose here that you just want to see images between 10 a.m. and noon. This way, we'll just see 1 or 2 images every day. You can even do a slideshow, so you're playing all of your images over a specific time period. It's a very simple way to get visual confirmation from the site. Next up would be the notes. The notes are a very powerful tool that allows you to create maintenance or information about the project. We simply click here, Plus, to create a new note. We connect it to a specific site. And we can choose to connect it to a specific sensor or just the site in general. So for example, if we were changing the battery, we can actually connect it to the battery. But if you choose the type, it's just going to be a maintenance note. Here, it's going to be today. And you'll check up. Went on site and checked the station. All good. Then you can even upload a photo of your visit. Then click Save. Now, the image and the text are saved to the notes. And when you're looking at the notes later on, you'll always be able to find all of your notes. You can even create a filter if you want to locate a specific note from either a specific project or a specific site. You can do that. Under Documents, users have the option to upload documents to the system. You can create multiple folders, for example, and they could be manuals, calibration sheets, reports, and so on. Then you can upload a PDF, Excel file, image, Word, and so on. It's as you would expect, and here you can click the brochure. I'm just going to click Add, and it'll give me an option here to choose a folder. And I'm going to choose an image. Site picture. I'll click Save. So now I have this photo here, and I can grab the image on the latest date when I want to. It's a great option to have all of your documents in one place and have easy access to the document. The client and staff members can easily grab the latest reports and so on. One thing I want to point out with the notes and the documents is that if you're going to User Setup, under both Documents and Notes, you have 4 options. You have No Access, View, Edit, and Admin. No Access means you don't have access to the documents. View means you can only view documents that you have access to. Edit means that you can upload new documents. You can delete your own documents, but you cannot delete other documents. Admin means that you can create new documents. You can delete your own documents and any other document. It's the same for notes. Excellent. Next up would be Download Data. Download Data is a super powerful tool to download data from the system. So again, we can just use here a couple of our sensors. We just double-click on them, and here we have our sensors. I can click Download, and as you would expect, the data is downloaded to my computer. I have here my timestamp and each sensor in a different column. I can even download data from different locations. These sensors here are the extensometers and are actually virtual variables. I'm not only just downloading the row, I'm also downloading the virtual variables. Here we can download the data since January 1st, for example. We simply click Download, and it only takes about a second. I have the data file ready. And here I have both the calculated data and the automatic weather station data since January 1st. But we don't need to simply download the raw data. We can actually change it to something called a summary. And in the summary option, you have options to do hourly, daily, monthly, and yearly. So let's do a monthly summary. Then, for each sensor, we can choose if we want to do a monthly average, maximum, minimum, and summary. So, for example, for the rain, I'm going to do a summary for the month. For the battery, I want to do the average. For the wind speed, I want to get here the maximum and the average. You can fully customize this. I want to get the average, maximum, and minimum for one specific sensor. Here, I'm going to remove a couple of extensometers. I just click Save here, and again, I'm just going to choose here my summary for my rain. I want to do my average from my battery, but for the wind speed, I want to get the maximum as well. Let's click Download, and I'll get a data file with 1 line per month. I'll actually get my average, maximum, and minimum summary. The system is calculating the average battery voltage. For example, for the whole month of April. We don't need to download the raw data. We can have Vista Data Vision do this calculation for us. So let's say you're doing this on a monthly basis, just to take a look at the data, doing some summary, if you don't want to do this manually each time. Then we just click Save here, and I'm going to save it as a monthly template. Next time when we come in to do our download, here we just click Load. And I have here my monthly template. Everything is pre-selected. I have here all of my sensors that I've chosen, and I have here the options that I have checked. It's so super simple to do this quickly. On the first of each month, you can do a summary report of all the sensors. Alright, the next option would be something called manual input. Manual input is used when you need to decide which sites should allow manual input. I have just one site that I allow manual input, and the manual input is you can do multiple different things. Either you can just delete a specific reading from the database, or you can modify specific values. Here, you can either type in NaN, or you can just change the actual value. You can also add a new reading, which you can choose here. This is September. Something like this. And you can type in the values for each sensor and click Save, and that'll be stored in the database. So if you're doing some manual collection of data, the data can be automatically or manually entered through the web interface. This is very useful for doing small corrections of the data, to remove bad readings, or to add new readings. Excellent! A similar way to modify data is something called validation. Again, I'm going to set up a validation. Here I have all of my sites, and I'll open up our webinar station. Here the validation is a process that will run automatically. So I'll activate here, for example, my air temperature. And if my air temperature ever goes below 6,000 or above 6,000, I have a couple of options. Either I can just take the last legal value, or I can do a linear interpolation between the previous grid point in the next grid point, or I can replace it with a null. Here, under Min and Max, it'll show us the minimum and maximum value in the database. But sometimes a sensor returns an error number that we want to remove from the system. And this would be a great way to do that. One thing to notice is the gap size. The gap size means if you change this to 4 and we get 4 or less readings that are outside our limits, it'll be validated. But if we get 5 or more, it'll not be validated. So we don't want to validate if we just get constantly bad data. We don't want to automatically validate it. So we just want to have a fail-safe. So if you get 1, 2, 3, 4 readings, it'll be validated. But if we get more, it'll not be validated. So all of our graphs will indicate that, and we should take a close look at why our sensor is constantly sending bad data. Very good. Next up will be something called localization. Localization means that you can modify how the data is presented in the system. So you can quickly tell the system how you want to have your date formatted. You can select 24 hours or 12 hours, whether you want a CSV or text file, letter size or A4, and how your delimiter and decimal point display. You can have multiple localizations if needed, and each user can have a different localization. Very good. There are about 2 items left that I want to cover here. One is the login page. Here we have our default login page, but you can have multiple login pages in the system, either different projects, different clients, or different departments, for example. I'm just going to create a new one. I'm going to choose a new background image. I'm going to choose this nice image here from Iceland and give it a name, Webinar. I can see the file name is index_webinar.html. I can add a description up here, below the login form. And I can change how I want the username and password to appear. And when I click Save, I can now see that I have 2 login pages. If I actually open up demo.vdvcloud.com, I can type in index. I can see here that I have a different login page, or a new login page, but I'm actually going into the same system. Here I could type O1 webinar, the user that we did before. I click enter, and now the user is the same as before. And I see the same data as before. I'm going to log in here quickly again as my admin. The last thing I want to cover here in this basic webinar is the store. For the administrator of each system, they'll have an option to see the store, or they will see the store. The store is the place where we're publishing new features, either bug fixes or simply new features. The icon will change on the screen if we have new components available. Here we have 4 components that we can install. So for example, if we need to update our virtual variable, it'll give us information about what's new in this release. Here we have an option to export or import a virtual variable from the web interface. I'll just click Update. I'll need to type in my administrator password. And the system automatically downloads the latest patches from our servers, and it applies them to the system. We're doing releases every few weeks, so all of our users have a system that is constantly being updated. Excellent! Before we do a quick summary, I want to point out the bookmarks, which are very interesting and quite useful. If we open up our dashboard, for example, we can do a bookmark. I want to bookmark my webinar dashboard. I'll add that here to the list. I can also bookmark, for example, a contact setup. So when I'm doing anything here in the system, instead of needing to go Setup and Contact, here I can quickly click my bookmark, and I can click Contacts so I'm automatically taken to that page. I can go to my webinar dashboard. Here you can do multiple bookmarks with the pages or feature that you're using most frequently, and this will save you a couple of steps with the mouse. All right, let's do a quick summary. There are a few options here that we offer our customers. We provide the whole package for our customers. As I mentioned, it can be installed locally, or it can be used on our cloud platform. We do on-site installation if needed, so we travel on-site to perform installation and training. We go into the full depth of all aspects or features of Vista Data Vision. We then conduct ongoing support. Through email, Skype, and by phone, we provide remote support where we remotely log into the servers. We also do custom development, so we can assist you with something that takes a lot of time or just sometimes a manual task. We often work with our clients when we want to minimize the time needed to work on the data. It can be specific graphs or specific reports that can reduce the time needed to work with the data. Here's a quick summary as we wrap up. This was just a quick introduction to Vista Data Vision. We didn't go into great depth with any of them. If there are any features where you want to go into more detail, send an email to our support team. We can either schedule a one-on-one session to go over specific features, or we can have a similar webinar for you and your team, where it's more focused on your needs as we're doing a training. We'll look at the system and how we have to set it up today and give you recommendations for what can be improved. And for those that are not using Vista Data Vision yet, we offer a 2-week free trial on our cloud platform. Please send us an email to support@vistadatavision.com and we'll have that set up quickly for you. And finally, please follow us on LinkedIn, where we're publishing articles, new updates, webinars, and so on. We're also releasing videos on our YouTube page. So thanks for taking the time today to learn more about Vista Data Vision. Hopefully it was beneficial for you, and as I mentioned at the beginning, we want the system to be easy to use. Anybody can use it, and it'll save you time. If you know how to use a mouse, you know how to use Vista Data Vision, but yet it's very powerful and reliable. So thank you, and have a great day.